Hello and welcome. My name is Dr. Anthony Thompson and I'm a senior lecturer and psychologist. And in today's episode, we'll be taking a look at one of the most frequently asked questions that we receive as academics. And that is, how many references do I need in my coursework? At a surface level, it might seem as though this has a very easy answer. I could just sit here and give you a number that academics may be looking for. However, in reality, it's not that simple. The number of references that you need in any given coursework will vary and change depending on A, the topic, B, your writing style, and C, how much evidence you want to put forward to support the claims that you're making. So in reality, when a marker is looking at your assessments, they're not trying to see whether you've met a specific number of references in your coursework. Instead, what they're looking for is to see whether you've provided enough evidence to support your point of view. Psychology is first and foremost an evidence-based discipline, and that means we as psychologists must show the evidence behind the points of view and the arguments that we're creating. Psychologists often have very powerful and influential roles in society. We make decisions about treatments for people's mental health and well-being. We make decisions around the rehabilitation of people in the criminal justice system. And we can't just make those decisions based on personal thoughts and opinions. That can leave people very vulnerable to biases and discrimination. Instead, we must always show our working out. We must always show how we've arrived at our conclusions, how we've designed an intervention, and why we believe something will work to help support an individual. So let's look at some tips that can help you work out how many references that you might need in your coursework. So tip number 1. If you're starting a sentence with a phrase such as, many authors have found, or lots of research has shown, then generally speaking, you're referring to there being multiple sources of evidence that support your point of view. In these cases, we would want to see multiple studies being cited at the end of that sentence. After all, you've told us that there are many or several studies that are all in agreement with your perspective, so show us those several studies that you've read that prove your point of view or support your point of view. Tip number 2 is to support each and every claim that you haven't personally investigated yourself with some form of evidence and citation. So for example, if you're saying something like depression and anxiety are on the increase, then how do you know that to be true? Where did you get the evidence from in the first place to allow you to come to that conclusion? So in this instance, once again, at the end of that sentence, you would want to support it with a citation to those statistics and those trends that you read about that support the point of view that's being made. Tip number 3. So in general, one of the best ways to familiarize yourself with how many references you need and where they should go in a sentence is to simply look for published journal papers from within psychology. So published journal papers will have the format and the layout that your markers are perhaps expecting at a higher education level, and they're often very useful to have next to you as you're writing a research report or an essay, just to double check that you are referencing to the same degree and with the same frequency as other psychologists in the area. And tip number 4, once you've finished your first draft of your assessment or your research report, leave it a day or so if possible, and then go back and read it with fresh eyes. And this time, when you're reading it through, put on your critical perspective hat and try and think that you are the harshest marker in the world, and you're looking specifically for the evidence to support the points that you've expressed. So as you read through your first draft, make a note of any gaps in your sentences where you think, actually, maybe I do need to support that with more evidence to show that I'm correct. Or maybe I haven't put enough emphasis on the citations here to show that I've really done that reading and I really do understand the research strands that I'm discussing. And by the end of this process, you'll really be able to get a feel for whether you've got a sufficient amount of evidence to support your point of view, or whether you need to go back and add in more citations and references to supporting evidence before you submit your final work. So in summary, there isn't often a specific number of references that your academics are looking for in your coursework. Instead, what they're looking for is whether you've been able to fully evidence and support the points of view and the claims that you're making in your assessment. The more evidence that you can provide, often the more persuasive the point of view is that's being expressed. Without sufficient references and citations, your work becomes more opinion-based than evidence-based, and that can lead to weaker arguments and therefore weaker marks being attracted. Psychology is first and foremost an evidence-based discipline, and as noted in this video, psychologists often have a lot of power and responsibility. And therefore, as a future practitioner and as a student studying academically the field of psychology, it's really good to get into those habits of justifying, supporting, and providing the evidence for your points of view and your decisions at this very early stage, and that will serve you very well in your future careers as well. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please do click like and subscribe, as it helps us to reach a wider audience of budding psychologists